been a lot of comms sent out from our comms team around nitrogen reporting. It is slowly getting better and better. Nitrogen reporting is also required by every dairy farmer, so sometimes there's a bit of confusion. Those organic farmers that don't use synthetic nitrogen are still required to report because the trigger is dairy farming. So there's a little bit of confusion there, but we can clear that up quite quickly. So if you hear anyone in the traps, remind them to get their NCAPs in.
Any other questions for Jared? Donna, if we could put them out, thank you.
It was just, did we get a higher percentage than last year in this one, Jared? I mean, has it improved? Sorry.
It's improved slightly from last year. It has got a bit better, but it hasn't improved as much as I thought it may have.
Oh, same.
So yeah, there's a little bit more chasing up this year than I thought I'd have to do.
And through you, Madam Chair, as we've noted to members, we've been very non-regulatory around this the first few years. It's reached a point where if people don't provide the information, then there will be some regulatory steps taken to address that, as we do with the rest of our business.
Anything else for Jared?
If you talk about the general list there, rather than this particular point.
Certainly.
Just this question about how did somebody, I know who, but what number, manage to get 100 litres of sulphuric acid tipped down somewhere? That seemed particularly careless and unfortunate. Page 73.
Yes, it was. So what happened there was ultimately it was unloading an IBC of sulphuric acid, which is significantly heavier than water, so one would expect. And ultimately it toppled and resulted in the IBC being pierced and discharging down the stormwater network, which was unfortunate. Credit must be to the company the way they responded to that. Unfortunately, it did result in a discharge to the receiving environment. It did result in an eel death. And however, you know, on the day there was bunds and dams and copper dams and all sorts put in to minimise it. But since then, the company has already ordered significant infrastructure to upgrade that system so that everything is will be on a real-time monitoring system to monitor such things as pH and turbidity and conductivity. And if it's not falling within spec, that'll automatically flick a switch and pump that area to trade waste. And if there's any power cuts or system failure, it automatically shuts down. So we're expecting that to be in place in the next couple of months.
And is there any long-term problem that you're detecting from this, like the damage to the environment in the stream from this?
No, the biggest effect on sulphuric acid was the sudden change in pH. So the pH plummeted to about 2, and that's when our team went down and worked with the offending company and removed as many eels from the environment as they could. And I think 3 or 4 had perished in that. And then the pH did recover quite quickly over the next 3 or 4 days. It took some time, but they did pump out as much as they could to minimise downstream effects.
I guess it would be phased down the river. The pH would gradually rise, but as the water at one end washed through. But just the same, it could have been a very serious incident.
It could have been, and if the stream was maybe a little bit swifter flowing, it would have taken away that opportunity to dam it and hold it up and mitigate that. So although there was adverse effects, they were probably very, very lucky in their response to minimise that effect.
Okay, Donald, you've got a question for Jared?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Page 71, there's from Wilson's there. They were doing earthworks near a wetland. Were they likely to know that that was a wetland before they started that drainage work?
Yes, ultimately. There was, I think, a reasonable amount of drainage work, and a majority of it wasn't in the wetland.
No,
But the part that was, I think, is reasonably clear to suspect it's a wetland. And if not convinced, definitely of a characteristic that would put a red flag up and think maybe ring the land management team or seek some advice on that.
but they hadn't necessarily been informed that it had been designated a wetland.
No,
Well,
no.
why would they need to be informed? They should make the inquiry, surely.
There's two edges to that, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of wetlands in Taranaki, right? And council doesn't have the resources to go and identify every single one, but the onus is on the digger operators and the landowners and everyone. If it looks like a wetland, smells like a wetland, it's probably a wetland, and seek some advice before you run in there with a 20-ton digger. Would be my advice.
I think that seems like excellent advice.
That's a good ending.
Does anybody else have any questions for Donna?
Just a positive. There wasn't very many complaints. That's good, isn't it?
It's very good, yes, and it's very good for my team that gets to sleep at night.
Because that was really low. That's one of the lowest we've had, isn't it?
Yeah, the last couple of weeks has been very low with complaints. So getting to a point where if they don't get a complaint for a week, there's got to be some sort of delivery from the on-call person to the team for not getting called out. But the number of complaints are decreasing at the moment. It is seasonal, so come spring.
No, but that was the lowest for that
Yeah,
month.
yeah. So come spring, people are out and about a bit more. Businesses are operating a bit more. The complaints do decline.
Thanks, Chair.
Anyone for any more? If not, can I move that we receive and note the various items in this part of the agenda? Can I have someone move? Tom and Neil to second, all in favour?
Aye.
Now, the live streaming is now functional, and I would like to know if Benita and Daisy can hear us through their computers or are still reliant on their phones. Fine. Okay, thank you. Right, the next item on the agenda is Finbar and the dam, and who will be the runner?
Through you, Chair, perhaps I can just repeat any questions or comments prior to answering them.
Right, whatever.
Other than-
And I can be the runner.
Oh, you're a bit old.
But still very fit in my own mind.
You're right.
Don't challenge him to stand squash.
Ageism. Oh, goodness. Right, the floor is yours, Finbar.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper is to update you about the implementation of the new dam safety regulations. It has two components. One is just providing an update on where we are of everyone submitting and their potential impact classifications, which is an assessment of basically how much damage would happen if a classifiable dam was to fail. That's going really well. We think we've got about 6 dam owners still to submit based on our records. The deadline for that has passed, and we're now reaching out to them, and we've sent them letters and are engaging with them. From our responses, it seems most of them are making their best efforts to you've got to get a recognised engineer on board to do this work. There's only 20-something of them for the entire country and hundreds of dams. So we know there's a lot of pressure on the system. So we're just working through it with those dam owners, and we'll continue to do so. The other part is that we have now declared a dangerous dam in Taranaki. That is the Highlands Park Detention Dam in New Plymouth, owned by the New Plymouth District Council. That has been assessed by Tonkin and Taylor at being risk of overtopping and failure, which is the dam busts in a 1 in 100 year flood. So that has a 1% chance of occurring any given year. If that dam was to break, Tonkin and Taylor assessed, depending on the time of day, potentially between 11 and 100 people would be at risk. It affects 139 properties. Some of those properties, that's just where there's any flood extent on the property. So some of those have it's like a tiny corner down in the back field. But potentially 53 dwellings across those properties could be flooded. That includes the Powerco business site. So we've publicly notified on both our website, and we put in a notification in the Saturday paper. MPDC has sent letters to all affected property owners, also informing them that this will go on their limb. And we've also directly informed Powerco and also TIMO about this.
We've also got them by email from the district council as well. So they've managed to post it, put it in our letterbox and send us emails. Which, given where we are, right at the mouth of the river, it would have to be epic.
And so in terms of next steps, under our dam safety policy, we're working with MPDC to agree an action plan of how they're going to fix the issue. They've been working on this for a while now. They knew that this dam was potentially dangerous before the regulations came on board, but it wasn't technically dangerous until they did. And so they're working with Tonkin and Taylor to do some detailed catchment modelling, essentially trying to figure out, is the dam, it's a flood detention dam, and the question is it actually really delivering much flood protection? So could they potentially lower the height of the dam so it's not at risky, or install another dam further upstream to reduce the risk? So they're working through those options now and have a plan, but we're just waiting for our latest update on timelines. I'll leave it there and welcome any questions. And as I said, I'll just repeat any questions for the benefit of those on the phone.
Thank you. Anyone got a question for Finn?
I guess it's just a matter which we've, I think, already talked about, but this is a dam in South Taranaki in which a farmer has a water, Fred is familiar with it, and the thing just, this little stream itself that's collected then just goes straight over a cliff and down into an empty beach. So there's obviously a big assessment of whether the effect of a flood, or even if the dam was burst, would have any effect. So it's not just the nature of the dam, it's also the flood aspect of what might happen. Is that how it works?
Through you, Chair, the question was around a dam in South Taranaki where it flows immediately over a cliff into the coastal environment, and the question of the assessment of risk in the process. So for how the dam safety assurance process works is there's two steps. First, you have to get an engineer to do that assessment of how much damage your dam would cause if it fails. And that comes back at either low, medium or high. And if you're a medium or high risk dam, so that Highlands Park is a high risk dam, you then have to develop what's called a dam safety assurance program, once again by a recognised engineer, which basically says how you're going to maintain the dam and make sure it doesn't burst. But if you're low risk in it, without presupposing what an engineer would find, it seems reasonable to suppose that that might be a low risk dam. So they just have to get it assessed, and then the process ends there for them. They've got to get it reassessed, I think, every 5 years. But yeah, as long as it's not medium or as long as it's low risk, they don't have to worry about those further steps.
It just collects a whole lot of water, which is irrigating the farm. But the stream is interesting in as much as there's no animals that can actually climb up 100 metres or whatever it is to get into the stream at all.
Hey, Donna.
I just wanted to know, with MPDC, can you put a time frame on them or not?
Through Chair, the question was whether we can put a time frame on MPDC to address the issue. So what our dangerous dam policy says is that we will work with the dam owner to agree an action plan, and through that we'll be setting the timelines of when we want various things to happen. I think the latest is they're expecting that initial modelling work to hopefully be done end of this month or next month, and that will inform, they'll go through a decision-making process with their council on what they do. We do have the ability under the regulations, if essentially we agree an action plan and they just drag it out and out and out, or they refuse to engage, which is obviously very unlikely for MPDC. You do have the power under the Building Act for us to go in there and do the works and recoup the costs and things like that. But that's obviously very much a last resort.
But we do.
Anything else? If not, I'm going to move that we receive and note the report. Do I have a mover, Tom and
Thank
Donna? All in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. And Leah, you're addressing us next on key native ecosystems.
No, Lee.
Leah. Oh, God. Oh, same, spelled the same.
Tēnā koutou, everyone. I'm here to talk to you about the memo to update you on the additions to the Key Native Ecosystem Register. So in the last 6 months of the last financial year, we added 9 new K&E sites to our inventory. and those sites covered 1,867 hectares. So far on the register, we have 390 KNEs that cover 132,500 hectares. Of those, 314 are partially or completely privately owned, and they cover 23,500 hectares approximately, which is 15.8% of the privately owned Indigenous vegetation in Taranaki. Of those 314 sites, 245 KNEs are under active management through a council biodiversity plan. And I just wanted to note an amendment to the memo. The figure in number 9, which is 23,571.75 hectares, should have been carried over to bullet point 17, where it says 32,571 hectares. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the new sites that have been added to inventory. Some of them are quite unique and exciting. So Wildlife Properties may contain the largest population of whio in the Eastern Hill Country. So we're currently working with the Department of Conservation to put the whio dogs through to get an accurate population estimate, and then we will plan the biodiversity plan with the landowner around the monitoring results that DOC finds. And so there could be up to 30 whio there. Waokina is on the South Taranaki coast, and it contains some coastal dune and wetland, and we are working with Ngā Whenua Rahui, which is the DOC legal protection mechanism for Māori landowners, to secure legal protection for that site as well as initiate management. Out of the 9 sites that are added to inventory, 2 of those already have biodiversity plans, and we are working towards biodiversity plans on the 7 others. We are working really closely with the QE2 Trust. 8 out of 9 have formal protection or it is pending. So we're really working hard to make sure when sites go onto inventory, they do secure formal protection in perpetuity. Top Farm, which is adjacent to Te Papakura or Taranaki, near Midhurst, it actually got its first assessment in 2014. So the biodiversity officer associated with that site has taken 10 years to get the landowner to the point where they're willing to secure a QE2 covenant and look at management through a biodiversity plan. So that shows just the ongoing commitment and dedication of the officers to the work that they do. The Okikoki site is an 18-hectare remnant of semi-coastal forest near Uranui, and the fencing was a 4-way split with New Plymouth District Council. It was our largest fencing bill to date across the landowner, QE2 District Council and us. The total was almost $90,000, so it was a significant investment to secure that site. And again, it had been in the works for a number of years before the landowner was willing to take the next step. So there's a lot of really exciting and interesting and varied work happening associated with the KNE program. And yeah, I'm open to questions.
Who's got a question for Lee? Oh.
I'd just like thank you, Lee, for all the work you're doing, and just to acknowledge those landowners, because it is a big thing, but pretty exciting. Yeah, really exciting.
Yeah, I think sometimes there is initial reluctance, and it's not until a biodiversity officer goes onto the property and really shares their knowledge, so they understand how unique and special these ecosystems are and the species that they contain. But it is a big commitment in terms of time and money. And even though we get alongside with support with a biodiversity plan, it is still a big ask of the landowner. And yeah, we really have to recognise their greater good commitment through the KNE program.
It does demonstrate the value of building a relationship, as your 10-year example demonstrates, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And some of the biodiversity officers, they almost become friends and family. You know, when they turn up on a property, there'll be hot soup waiting or a cake, and they definitely, they know them very well.
Anybody else got a question for Lee?
Through you, Madam Chair. So the few, have they come off the mountain, or have they come up from the Wainuku River, or where have they come from?
Yeah, it's hard to say. There's a couple of small populations, sort of 2 or 3 pairs out in the Eastern Hill Country on some of the clearer, fast-flowing streams. But this site seems to have, the landowners reported 30, so it's hard to know whether he's seeing the same
Accumulating,
birds moving
yeah.
across the property, or whether that's the population estimate. And so we can't really initiate management support until we know how many and how far along the streams on the property they spread. And so that's why we get Theo Dog and Joe, and yeah, she will pinpoint where to go, and then we'll have a conversation about probably trapping to
Yeah, I was
support,
going to say.
to support the breeding success there.
But that just highlights, Madam Chairman, that no matter where you are, there are these things happening despite what we do. But if we can put the support alongside them, it makes it that much more successful, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Neil.
And I was just going to compliment you on your service too. I'm actually owning 5 QE2s. So the point is that some of those have things like bats, and kiwi is another area. And it just seems that you're getting more and more of these throughout the whole province. Is this creating a workload issue in terms of, you know, shall we say, promoting these things? Because how many have you got total now? You've got quite a number.
We've got 245 biodiversity plans, and we have 5 biodiversity officers servicing those plans. The plans are initially for a 5-year period, and then they have a review. And at that time, we assess what gains have been made and where to for the future, and where the landowner is at. We are going through a process at the moment around prioritisation, so similar to the Department of Conservation, looking at what priority ecosystems and threatened species are on private land and trying to target our biodiversity plans to that. So a landowner with high priority ecosystem, like a coastal herb field or a wetland, would get a full biodiversity plan, whereas someone with a piece of a forest remnant that is well protected on conservation land would get a simple biodiversity plan. So that's really an opportunity to support their engagement and get them going on the journey, but our degree of support over time is less. So we're looking at, I guess, a cost benefit analysis to achieve maximum biodiversity outcome.
Just one other point about this. In certain areas, one particularly, 2 areas I have, there are other people who have QE2s or these areas. And if in fact you could persuade some people between them that they should connect those, it might make the job a lot easier, because you end up with a far bigger area. Some of them, there's one I can think of that's got probably 400 or 500 hectares linked up. If you could, at the moment there are several. I own one up, I think 100 and something or other hectares, and then there's another one with a gap between further over. So maybe a strategy of looking at some of the in-between people who might actually make it easier for you to do your job.
Absolutely, and we've got a property in North Taranaki that we're working with the landowner in QE2 right now, and they're part of a larger contiguous patch of bush. So we're door knocking between both of our organisations, the neighbours, to try and secure the whole bush block. And the same situation applies with wetlands. So wetlands are very rarely contained within one property. They're often part of a larger system and a catchment. So it makes sense if we can, as you say, bring in the different neighbours and secure protection over the whole ecosystem. And we also work closely with the Taranaki Kiwi Trust. So they have a community trapping program, and they're reviewing that at the moment to focus on some core areas which are actually clusters of landowners. So we're working alongside them through our biodiversity plans to try and secure that cluster rather than individual landowners, because you're right, especially with regard to ungulate control, for example, or possum control. If we're just biting it off one property at a time, it's not very cost effective. But if we can secure a larger area, it's definitely bigger wins, bigger gains, and more effective use of the funding.
Thank you. Benita, did you have a question? Anyone else? If not, can I move that we receive and note Lee's report? A mover and a seconder, Donald and Neil, all in favour?
Aye.
Thank you, Lee. And we're moving on to the next matter, riparian native plant scheme. Don.
still?
Because Benita can hear from, she doesn't need the phone. And
Phone?
Daisy,
Daisy's gone.
okay, so I think the phone's finished.
Tēnā koutou katoa. For those that don't know me, my name's Don Sherman. I'm the Land Services Manager here at the Taranaki Regional Council. And today I just want to give you just an update on the implementation progress of our riparian management program, and particularly highlight the milestone of passing 8 million plants, and in actual fact it's 8,142,487 plants, by the way, and to give you a brief summary of where we're going to in the next phase of our riparian management program. Right, so just to recap on the nascence of the program that happened in 1993. It actually got passed by council in March, then our riparian management strategy, with a half a full-time equivalent person dedicated to take the program forward. I first got involved with the program in 1997, and since then we've prepared over 3,000 riparian plans and covered over 18,000 kilometres of waterways. The biggest question is, how do you get 3,000 plans prepared for people that don't necessarily want them? So that's another operational success story in its own right, and a story for another day. But it's probably the most significant of the critical success factors of the whole program. The stats are up there you can see what's been actually implemented based on what's been recommended. In particular of note there, just under 6,000 kilometres of new planting. So if you lined up all those plants a metre apart, that would stretch across the width of Australia and halfway back again. So I don't know if you've ever driven across Australia, that'd be 40 plus another 20, 60 hours of continuous driving of a row of native plants, or 6 hours by plane if you're flying. So that's a lot of planting. The job's not totally finished yet, but the back of it has been well broken. And I just want to note, this is not just about fencing, this is about fencing and planting, and not just the NES stock exclusion regulations, which are just 1 metre wide streams. This is all waterways, streams, small first order streams, less than a metre, and all the drain network, because after all, runoff flows across the land and enters any of those points. So this is about water quality, both fencing and planting, not just stock exclusion. So to help remove the barriers to the cost of planting, the council's pioneered its native plant scheme, with the whole purpose, because obviously the planting is the other 50% of the equation with riparian management, all the benefits associated with that, stream bank stability, shading to keep water cooler for more dissolved oxygen for fish, reduction in periphyton, not to mention all the benefits for just farm management, as well as creating those biodiversity wildlife corridors from the mountain to the sea. So we initiated a tender system whereby the competition through a tendering process, we could actually get or acquire plants at wholesale rates or bulk supply, and then pass those savings and costs back on to farmers. But the key there is that they're not subsidised by ratepayers to the farmers. It's the process of bulk purchase and getting those through the tendering system that we can actually get them at these, a third of the sort of natural or normal retail prices. We've had a policy of supporting local nurseries right from the outset, and those that could, increase their supplies and met the specifications have participated. But as we've gotten bigger, we've had to rely more on some of the bigger commercial nurseries from outside the region. But saying that they are still collecting their seed source from within Taranaki. So I think the last point there, the initial days of one site delivering plants out of the regional council, the bird cage that's just been knocked down from the very first days of the scheme to getting up to nearly 1 million plants, 985,000 actually. And the significance of that is that that was the year of post-COVID with the Jobs for Nature, and no other council could actually mobilise themselves and get a program into action to get plants in the ground for the winter of 2021. And so we had our scheme, we actually had it delayed because of government getting the contracts finally written in place, and we couldn't upsize the program until late September, August, but we managed to do that, and that was one of the responses to the Jobs for Nature, and the explanation of all that's in the paper that you can read, but that was quite a significant achievement. So this graph here depicts that sort of history and that peak there in year 25 of the plant scheme, which is actually 2021. But it's really another change in phase of the program and another operational success story in itself of actually after getting the plans done, it's actually getting the work done on the ground, and that's the implementation phase. And how do you get farmers to plant, consistently across that period there, 300,000 to 400,000 to 500,000 plants every year, when they don't necessarily want them? So that's another story in its own right. So now I'm just going to show you what the actual scheme looks like on the ground and the logistics involved as far as having these plants grown, delivered by the nurseries, and then picked up by all the individual farmers, and the amount of labour that's required to make all this happen, both outsourcing and within the council, creating the invoices and all that sort of stuff. So this is one of the sites when we were operating 5 sites at Pongarehu. We've had a good relationship with Balance, who have supported us and let us use this site. This is the Opanaki site, the old dairy factory, which used to be a bulk store for Balance, who also helped us out in that respect. But later on, it was purchased by Mr. Darryl Hickey, who also let us continue operating out of that site. So it was a bit more complicated with some of the vats and things that arrived there in the latter years, but it was strategically a good site as well. This is our Leopardton site, usually around about 80 to 90,000 plants, but the big year we had, they were stacked all over the place and over 100,000 plants. The other site, before I move on to this last one here, is Stratford A&P Showgrounds, which is probably one of the best sites, and it can accommodate over 120,000 plants and dispatched through the labour of the A&P Society. This one here that Marie, if you can get that to work, is the site at the Dairy Trust Taranaki at the Whareroa site. And this is just a bit of a drone footage just after that all being delivered, and usually around the 90,000 or so plants down here. So it's quite a major operation to get them all delivered, etc., and dispatched. So you can see, the quality of the plants that we're talking about. Generally in the half metre tall category, PB3 equivalent, somewhere around that grade, and good eco-source sturdy plants. So you get the sort of feel for the size of it. We've had to rely on, as the numbers gotten bigger and the local nurseries couldn't really meet that demand it's those other nurseries, commercial nurseries that have that capacity upside and meet the larger numbers. And that site has been, made available to us, a special help through Brendan Natural, who's helped us organise and allow this operation to go out harbour. And of course, there's not only getting the plants and getting them delivered and dispatched, it's actually getting them in the ground, because that's basically what we're doing. And there's just a couple of photographs to highlight the difference of sort of before and after of what things, could have used to look like and what they're starting to look like now as we transform the Taranaki landscape. In particular, the smaller streams and the little seeps and wetlands that we want to fence off and protect as well. And ultimately, the bottom right photo of as the vegetation starts to mature, we start seeing those benefits coming in. And just another example of some good plantings where the plants are still relatively young and growing, and they'll provide quite a bit of shading and habitat as they get older. So moving into the next phase, this is not obviously capturing the South Taranaki terraces and the northern terraces, but the heart of the ring plain and all those black boundaries are where our riparian management plans are. And the red ones highlighted are basically the about 160 odd that we've started our new auditing process on. And what's the purpose of auditing? Well, it's actually to get that official baseline of what waterways you have on your property, what category they are, what is the extent of the work that's been done, and to quantify the work that's still to go, and at the same time assess the quality of what's been planted. So you won't be able to read the details of that, but this is basically one of those red boundary lines zoomed in. And if we start on the top left, you can sort of see we can locate the property itself, and then we move into the top right where we start to see the maps that are produced after the audit's taken place. So each of those lengths or sections of the waterway have been delineated based on some criteria, which I'll talk about a bit later. But you can see the different colours, and we'll get to those in the report later. But basically on the bottom left there, if you click on any of those sections, you can obtain all the information that's been inputted to come up with the grade on the quality of that section of riparian planting based on the fence type, the vegetation type, how much shading it's providing, the width of the margin, etc., etc. And then there's a photo link to that site that shows you what that is being described. And you can see there that photo of a drain. Basically, one side's got a buffer that could be effective at intercepting overland runoff, and the side on the left, the fence is very close, and it's not providing adequate filtration. And this is what the farmer receives, a report that each of those sections with the grade for both separately for the fence type, because not all fences are stock proof. Some of them are wires hanging on the ground and not doing the right job. And then the other grading for the vegetation that's present there. And when combined together, that section's given an overall grade. Dark green being a top grade, A grade, getting into lighter green for average quality, being the yellow into bare minimum, but still passable, and no reds on there. But if there's a red there, it would basically be a no fence for a waterway that required stock exclusion under the new regulations. So a report for the farmer, and they'll get a series of 3 maps. This is their official waterway map with each waterway type on the map and labelled. There'll be a natural wetlands. You can see that show up quite easily there. It's be harder to pick out the streams that are over 1 metre wide, and drains and streams less than a metre wide, that will be on that map as well. So that's the official baseline. So if they want to, as Jared talked about previously, want to start getting diggers into wetland, well, they'll have a map to show them what it should and shouldn't be doing. The other part of the map series that they'll get in this audit is this is basically a record of what was in place at the time the plan was prepared and what they've done since. It shows it both spatially and quantitatively as well. And just to show you, don't expect you to follow that, but just to show you what sits in behind those grades that you saw in the report. There's a series of workflows based on some science and logic. And I'll just quickly describe that basically at the start, you work your way across depending on the waterway type, the width or size of the stream, and the size of the buffer that's present that the fence is providing. And once you get to that point on the right, you then move on to adding the vegetation and working through a similar process based on how well planted it is, how many gaps, how much shading, all of those things, and that's how you end up with the grade on the right as to the type of vegetation. So it's sort of it's an objective input of data that goes through a process and comes out with a grade at the other end. And this is the spatial map that shows you where on your farm those particular grades appear. So this is the package that the farmers will receive, and this is, I should note, the original presentation that was circulated. We've since updated the technology, and this is one of the other parts to the auditing where you can also zoom into a property and look at those photographs of that particular section that's been audited. So this is an example of where we have, and we put into our models, where we have a lot of fencing in place that's assumed to be providing riparian management benefits, but you can see there that fence is actually 6 inches from the edge of the waterway. It's 2 wires, but it's actually good for keeping stock out, but it's actually not providing any filtration or buffering, and that particular site in the winter could be totally bogged out, and obviously a lot of surface runoff directly into the waterway. And then at the end of all of that, depending on the grades that come out, it dictates the monitoring or the revisiting regime, depending on what needs to be done for the rest of that property as far as the riparian management goes, fencing and planting. And that's where we're at this moment. So if you have any questions.
Neil.
Yes, well, firstly, Don, I think over all these years, we'd like to congratulate you and your people for the mapping systems that you do, not only for the sort of lowland farms, but backcountry farms, and indeed all the trees you put out and the 8 million that you've done. We're reaching a point, though, where you can see that as you've closed the gap on the farmers who haven't actually got their riparian, 10% to the left, and also the ones whose riparian areas need a bit of attention, that the numbers of trees and things might decline, and the requirement for the service as it stands at the moment might be, the numbers of trees and everything might decline. So we do have to look at that. But I'm interested in another subject which is linked to that, and which we just had a conversation before, and that is that the forestry blocks out in the backcountry, many of those, as we know, and I won't go into it, are not really economically attractive for replanting. So you take a forest off, maybe, or whatever you do, it's a very poor return, and the likelihood that somebody is going to replant is dependent upon a number of factors, but there's going to be a number of people who I hear are abandoning their areas. That's to say, just sort of leaving it to nature to put in pampas and gorse and what have you. And also people who want to actively go back for various other economic reasons and create native bush. So as far as your programs are concerned, what we may have to be looking at, you've got your land management officers looking at these things, the whole question may come back and your people may be asked, well, how do I regenerate this area? How do I close it off, turn it back into being a proper natural bush situation? Perhaps it should have been in the first place. And I believe that it might also include some of these riparian plant areas and so forth. So have you conceived or thought about the fact that there is this whole area which is going to be really important for the environment if in fact you end up with a lot of areas that we could persuade our farmers into turning back into native bush?
Yes, if you remember back to that graph, you'll notice that the last couple of years that the plant numbers have been dropping, and that's because we have been moving towards an advanced order and deposit system. Previously, we would extrapolate what we ordered last year and what people bought, and then we'd, put on a similar amount and then promote it and speculate what we need, and then hope we would sell the majority of them and have none left. But unfortunately, it doesn't always work. And because farmers have always thought it's a bit like a shop and they'll just turn up and get them in March or April. And if they decide one year not to, then we're stuck with 20, 30,000 plants unsold. So we're moving to an advanced order systems whereby you order your plants a year in advance, you pay $1 per plant deposit, and so we will have grown to what the actual demand is, and then it's a straight grow, pass on, no leftover plants. So the point now will be for the farmers to respond, like whether we need to even keep a plant scheme going will depend on the response by farmers to pre-order a year in advance, and we'll expand again if that demand picks up, but it'll be based on that pre-ordering system. So yeah, if there are suddenly 20, 30,000 more or whatever it is, and farmers do respond, the plant numbers will probably continue if that's the best thing.
See, with the backcountry areas, original farm plans looked at the effect of things of the day. In other words, this was the economy of the area, this is what you can do. Now, of course, there's a different economy, a different way of looking at it. So our farm officers talking to the actual backcountry owners in view of perhaps updating the plans a little, and maybe getting them to a point where they'll be more interested in erosion control and more interested in the possibilities we've talked about again of some of the tools the government may use, because I think there's a whole area there that really we need to upgrade a bit and give them that advice, because it would be very helpful, and it may in fact influence some of these riparian type plant decisions and so forth.
Yeah, well, the hill country farm plan system will be going forward focused on in particular the erosion aspects of it, and land use changed obviously to mitigate and prevent against erosion, and depending on what the best tree is, it's the right tree obviously for the right place. And some of the early 90s forest boom plantings got planted in all sorts of places beyond our control that are now been starting to show up where they can't harvest them and all those issues. So it will be, if it's a better off with reversion or some other tree cover than forestry, then that will be promoted as well. But the focus will move to soil conservation and erosion control as we move in potentially to the freshwater farm plan system, where sediment is one of the key attributes for water quality.
But we've got time for one more short question because we need to get a crack on. Well, maybe two. Hang on, Dion, because I think yours will be a very short question. Donna, then Dion.
Hey, where do you see technology with things like Halter with virtual fencing?
It's actually in that scrambly diagram up there as a genuine method of stock exclusion. If you've got a halter system and they don't go down to the creek, and obviously we still need to have a buffer there. It's not just about stock exclusion, because if they go grazing right to the edge, they're not going in there, but they're not leaving an extra buffer. So it's definitely an option.
And what are we doing with these plans that, well, where there isn't a plan?
We
What's
do
the-
have the stats on the remaining properties. We're getting down to some of the smaller blocks, and we're probably 300 to 400 of those, and we might just have a handful of potential dairy farms that are not on there, but we are talking about a handful. And we're working our way through, still preparing, 30 plans a year, picking away at the sort of filling in the gaps, if you like. And eventually, with the freshwater farm plan system, potentially we'll, capture those as well.
Because we need to get them now.
Thank you. Dion?
Yes, kia ora tōna, and thank you for your update. Over 8 million plants is a significant milestone. So well done. Just acknowledging that iwi, when they do resource consents, they do look at, when they can, they do look at riparian management plans. That sort of helps them to identify the steps that property owners are taking to protect waterways. I was just related to that, I was wondering, when plans are complete, like a 10-year-old plan, maybe 10% completed, how do you encourage the landowner to complete the riparian planting?
It still currently is a voluntary program, so it relies on the relationship and the behaviour change capacity of our team to get the farmers to want to do it. At this stage, the next question or next phase will be how council moves forward with development of the land and water plan and the potential regulations or whatever that go with that, as far as finishing the rest of the program, whether that's through some rule or action plan that's sort of that's been decided at the moment, well, to be worked through.
Hey, Richard?
If I jump in last time. Hey, kia ora Don, awesome mahi there, mate. One question I have is around increasing the biodiversity of the plant species themselves. Obviously, there's been a stock standard species list which has been used in the past. Some of the feedback coming in is that they'd like to expand that pool of plants. Now, obviously, you've got to weigh up price, etc., hardiness. But is that something on the radar around actually looking to expand that pool of plants?
So when we first started the scheme, it was about what nurseries could grow, and some of them take actually a couple of years, and there's a tendering system where they're growing something 2 years and not sure whether they're going to get a market for it or someone to buy it can be challenging. And we've had a few species on the list for increase the variation, etc. But they've either fallen off because of the difficulty of growing them. Generally, it's a sort of the colonizers of secondary succession type plants that create the cover. And we see as the auditing goes on and the fences get moved out, and farmers come to that conclusion themselves when they put the fence right down the edge and it's out of the floodplain up the bank, and there are further areas to plant, then and the stuff that's already been planted, there's capacity to start introducing podocarps and all other Totara and many other species that have now got cover to grow rather than being planted directly in exposed conditions. So yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Don. And if I could have a mover and a seconder for the receipt and noting of that report, Neil and Donna, all in favour? And we're moving now to Victoria and the Dow.
Kia ora koutou. The memo before you is a summary of the recently completed preliminary site investigation report for the Dow site at Paratutu in New Plymouth. It's a significant milestone to have actually completed this report. So this is a summary of all of the data that is available for the site. The next steps is really to come up with what they call a sampling and analysis plan, which is to say where the gaps are. So there's a whole load of stuff that's been investigated over the years. Now they've looked at it, they said, yeah, okay, this bit's a bit light. So we'll receive that soon. And the plan then is to start investigating before the end of the year. So I'm happy to take any questions.
So,
one question I would like to ask you, if I can. For as long as I've lived in Taranaki, there have been sort of people with information. Is part of your process to receive that kind of anecdotal information?
Absolutely. It isn't our process. It's actually coordinated by Dow and their consultants. But as part of the data collection, there was, they interrogated everybody's data through Cortiva, Dow, TSE, NPDC, and then they interviewed. They had a questionnaire online for anybody to fill in, and then they went back and did supplementary interviews with key people who particularly wanted to be heard. So this is all within this report.
Right.
Through you, Chair, the appropriate processes for them to feed that information through Tonkin and Taylor.
Right, I'm just concerned to make sure that that information is a way of making it into the consideration process.
Absolutely.
Right, does anybody else have a question?
So, Madam Chairman, this is largely a desktop exercise as opposed to a physical
That's exactly
inspection.
what it is. Yeah.
And the physical will follow.
Yeah, the next open, we suggested here there'll be a geophysical element, and then I'll get into doing investigations with boreholes and trial pits. Yeah, for the next stage.
That's when the rubber will hit the road.
Yeah, and it may become an iterative thing. They've split the site into 10 chunks, and they'll start at a reasonably low risk part of the site as they practice their methodology, and they'll review that methodology and then refine it and return. And that's all done in discussion with with our peer reviewer, who we've appointed jointly with NPDC and Mana Whenua. So that will be scrutinised at every step. And I mean, I think Mana Whenua will work really closely with Dow throughout this. They meet independently.
So,
Yeah, other questions?
Madam Chairman, so is there other sites around the world similar to this that we can draw experience from, or?
I'm sure there are. Dow recently had an experts meeting of their own internal people in the States, where I know that they did discuss Paratutu. Everyone was sort of talking about their own independent case studies. I think that the difference we have here in New Zealand is that we do have such close relationships with our iwi communities, which has added a really interesting complexity for Dow, who've never experienced a contaminated site in New Zealand before. So it's something that's being worked through really carefully, and they're learning a lot.
Thank you, Victoria, and I look forward to further updates. On that cheery note, if I can have someone move that we receive that report, Charlotte, and had you seconding, Tom?
Thank you.
All in favour?
Aye.
Moving now to the public excluded part of the agenda. Can I have someone move that we move into public excluded? And seconded, Donna. All in favour? And we're moving now to item number 13,